Well, Dana's painted a great picture of what we have the pleasure of looking forward to in our community. Okay, I have to swallow the mic to do it. All right. Thanks, Dana, for giving us this picture. My name is Phyllis Madachy. I'm the Vice President of the Aging and Health Division of the Coordinating Center, and along with the League of Women Voters, we're absolutely delighted to be part of this forum hosted by the Howard County Citizens Association. There are two other people here from the Coordinating Center, and if you would stand, please, because I actually want to point you out. There's two women back here, Michelle and Jennifer. Jennifer is our communication coordinator, and so she'll be tweeting during the day so that the rest of the community understands what's happening at this forum. And Michelle is a person who can help you find my slides. I do have some copies of it and other materials about the Coordinating Center. So those are the go-to women back there. I want to thank the Citizens Association for hosting this. As I said to Stu earlier today, when we talk about aging in place, the reality is there has to be a place. So there has to be neighborhoods that are conducive, both the housing as well as the sidewalk system and the road system, to older people, actually for generational reasons too. And there has to be housing that is either can be modified or is built the right way in the first time with features of universal design. And those are all bread and butter, I hope, to the Howard County Citizens Association. The Coordinating Center, just a minute on this, many people don't know the name, the Coordinating Center, so I wanted to take 30 seconds. And you can go to the next slide. We are a 30-year-old nonprofit organization in Maryland. We provide care coordination to approximately 5,400 people a year, many of whom live in Howard County. And the reason you don't know the name is that, first of all, we're statewide and we're not based in Howard County. But the second reason is that our services are delivered in people's homes. And so, trust me, the 5,400 people that we serve, they know us. And you may know them too. If you know a person who has a child that's come home from a hospital with ventilator services, or if you know an older person who was involved in our Opting for Independence program a couple of years ago. Our mission is to provide services, to provide care coordination to people who are living in the community with complex medical needs. And that's people from babies coming out of the hospital with ventilator services to older adults who are trying to find a way to stay in their homes. And you can visit Michelle back there for more information about the Coordinating Center. What I want to talk about today is the product of a 3-year grant that we had from the Administration on Aging, a federal agency. We were one of 14 grantees across the country, tasked with given the opportunity to try out innovative strategies to help people age in place. That we were the only one in Maryland with that, and we partnered with the Howard County Office on Aging to provide what's called person-centered care coordination, which is me walking in and saying to Chuck, what is it you want your life to look like? And then organizing things around that, which is a different kind of approach than you might be familiar with. It was very successful, and we were very pleased with the outcome of it. Specifically, what I want to focus on are report case studies that we did, interviews with older adults, a total of 62 older adults over a 2-year period, and produced reports that I refer to as the case study reports. The project was led by Rusty Toler, who will follow me at the podium, and he was also the author of the 2 reports. We were looking to hear what did people over the age of 65 who wanted to live in this community, if not in the home that they were currently in this community, wanted to remain here, what were they thinking about in terms of their aging future? What did they see as the strengths that they brought to this part of their life? What did they see as the barriers that might be new to them? It was really a person-centered perspective on aging. The findings that I'm going to talk about are very different than a survey. I cannot say to you X% of the people who were interviewed said this, and therefore X% of the people in Howard County would match this kind of a finding. That's not what case studies are about. They are about listening to the individual and then analyzing what we hear, looking for trends, and looking for what I call outliers. What are the concepts, what are the ideas that stand out and are extraordinary, but not everybody has said that. So we look for trends and outliers in the case study report. The report I want to talk about is called Resiliency in Older Adults. And the reason that we called it resiliency is that, let me back up just a minute. For this report, we interviewed 32 people basically along the Route 1 corridor and parts of eastern Howard County, that dense part of the population that Dana had shown to you earlier. And when we cast the net for volunteers to be interviewed, we asked that they have incomes under $50,000. Now, at $52,000, if you have an income of under $52,000 and forget assets, you would be eligible for medical assistance for spend down. So you would be eligible for medical assistance in a nursing facility. So that's one of the reasons we use that $50,000 cutoff. But as I said, most of them had annual incomes under $20,000. We call this the resiliency report because Rusty and I keep getting this question. And now I've got the answer, Rusty. We called this the resiliency report because we found that the people that we interviewed in 2012 had lifelong practice in finding low-cost strategies for what was important in their lives. And that practice and that experience made them resilient. It gave them a bit of a leg up over folks that many of whom we had interviewed the year before who vaguely knew that there was something that they were going to need to do, but they weren't quite sure what. These folks had, as I said, had a lifetime of practice to find resources. That doesn't not mean their life was easy, but they had more experience at it. So what did we hear? You can go to key findings. What did we hear? I'd like to point out three things in the findings. The first is that we heard that their social support network was extremely important to them, that they trusted information that they heard from peers, that it either validated what their health care team had told them, or sometimes was different, which led them in another direction. It also, this social network, neighbors, friends, and sometimes family, but this social network was also particularly important for people who did not have their family here or did not have any family that they could rely on. So that was one of the first key findings in the resiliency report, which was also echoed, by the way, in the earlier study that we did 2 years ago. The second had to do with where people lived. We interviewed a number of renters who were in senior housing. And we heard them say that in terms of getting information or vetting information that they'd heard or looking for new strategies, they had two resources. One was the manager of their building, and the second was many of these people lived next door to or were nearby a senior center. And so the senior center staff and the housing staff became trusted sources of information that they could go to as their needs, as their life issues changed over time. Next slide. The third finding that I wanted to point out was actually echoed by the earlier group also, the group that we interviewed in 2012, or 2011, sorry. Both groups had strong concern about their ability to pay for things in the future. And those concerns were focused on the future of Medicare and the future of Social Security. And for this most recent group, Social Security was a primary resource, financial resource for them. So we're talking about ability to pay bills, ability to take care of my house if that's where I live. So it wasn't just health care as we think about it, it was living. So lots of concern about what's going to happen in the future. Next slide, please. We formed these findings that we heard, the things that we heard, into what we call 4 pillars, which will be addressed by Rusty Toler. But I'd like to point out, if you just look at the graphic, all these pillars are equal to each other. Not one is bigger than another. However, like things built on a pillar, if one is weak or weaker, it sometimes is compensated for by the ones that are stronger. So I want you to keep these 4 pillars in mind when you hear Rusty. Let me jump to the recommendations. This, let me see. implications. We go ahead several slides, and I want you to go to the one that says recommendations. This project had a steering committee. It was led by the Office on Aging with help from the Coordinating Center. The steering committee was composed of organizations that had a stake in what these findings were all about. And the organizations were the Community Action Council, the Association of Community Services, and the Coalition of Geriatric Services. These organizations put their heads together and to take a look at, you can go to long term, to take a look at the recommendations that they wanted to make. I'd like to highlight the first one under long term, and that has to do with, this may sound not very tangible to you, but the organizations felt that we're really sending, the universal we're sending the wrong message about older adults. We're talking about the needs of older adults, and will they be a burden on our community, and how are we going to do it? And one parallel message that the agencies would like to see is the message that seniors are an asset in the community, that they are what makes Howard County, that they are part of how we have a good quality of life here. Are the physical abilities changing for some? Certainly. But it is a wrong message to say, oh my heavens, we're going to drown, because we're not. And if I think about the older adults that we interviewed, all of us are part of that solution. So it's not, what are we going to do for seniors? It's what is the entire community, including older adults, going to do for the entire community? The second, next slide please. The second recommendation I want to focus on has to do with multi-generational families. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about families that actually live together, but it's not enough to direct a message to a baby boomer and say, these are strategies for aging in place. We also have to be talking to go back to the social network, we have to be talking to the adult children, and sometimes we have to be talking to the grandchildren, because it's a community message. It's not just a message focused on a particular age group, even though they may be the beneficiaries of what that message has to say. And the last recommendation that I want to point out is that all of us need to create a stronger awareness of what's out there, and more importantly, I think, the benefit of it. I want to bring in this person-centered theme. It's not enough for me to say to Jessica, here are 6 things that you really want to think about. The better approach is to create what I call working knowledge about what the community has to offer. And that working knowledge means that Jessica can say, wow, you know what, that's really going to match what I am facing right now. So there needs to be a stronger awareness, and there need to be multiple partners in creating this awareness. Okay. Thank you. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Swallow this?
Yep.
Well, I would like to thank Phyllis for giving my first opportunity after I left my formerly high-paying job at the Social Security Administration to become the project director for OFI, giving me experience working for the minimum wage. Like Mark Twain said, though, always do right. This will gratify some people and astonish the rest. This was a very, very interesting project. We didn't know what we were going to find when we went in there, but I would like to start out with how Phyllis just ended. This was not a bunch of people at either income level feeling sorry for themselves. Okay, and I don't think there were people in denial either, because you're all here today. I do think there's a lot of uncertainty. I'd like to talk about the 4 pillars. Can you go back to that? There you go. Like I said, this was original research. Usually when you do research, you go find out what everybody else has done and then you steal it. And come to find out, years ago, I was involved with the ARP when they did their re-imaging. And the ARP at that time came up with 4 things for security for people, and it was saving, Social Security, savings and pension, health care, and work. So somewhere along the lines, we looked at the results from the interviews, and they were all recorded and transcribed, and Phyllis and I looked at each and every one of them. We saw a four-pillar approach, and basically, it was I'm going to talk about them a little bit differently in a different order than Phyllis did. The first one is financial. This is really framing an issue, having an experience of 30 and 40 years working for both the VA and Social Security, very much aware of how bureaucracies talk their own language. And to all my colleagues in the Aging Network, which I'm now part of, I think that's somewhat true, and you'll see that in a minute. This is really a simpler way of looking at framing your aging in place plan. The first was financial. Now, as Jerry McGuire said, follow the money. In Howard County, we're relatively lucky. We have a wealthy county. I think we're third or fifth, and we're, of course, overly reliant on federal retirees like myself. But despite this, both sets of interviews, there is economic insecurity. The first group, as long as Social Security and federal pensions are basically left alone, they thought they would be okay. Although, interestingly, as we got into the project, more and more uncertainty was coming in because of the boomerang generation moving back in. In fact, there was something today that said 4 million people 25 to 34 have actually moved back in with their parents. I happen to know that to be true because my stepdaughter's living in my basement. The second group was not so sure. We use Bruce Springsteen's line, they ride the line of balance and they hold on by just a thread. Okay, they are one step away from bad things happening. And that is why organizations like the Community Action Council and the Senior Center Network is very, very important. This is not limited to older people. In fact, the EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey just out a couple of months ago indicated that 50% of the population does not have $2,000 on cash on hand to handle an unexpected expense. I'm aware in Howard County there's something called the Self-Sufficiency Project. That is a very important project. It's also a reason, the fact that many people don't have $2,000 cash on hand, that's the reason Wall Street is in the credit card business. Planning at all stages of life is important. But did you know that only 30% of households have a budget? Okay? As far as older Americans go, as with every American, the actual biggest expense is housing. Housing expenses count for 30% of seniors' income, even if your house is paid for. 40% of older Americans have experienced a house cost burden, which is mortgage or rent plus utilities is over 30% of your income. And it's kind of a myth that everybody 65 to 74 or 75 and up, the houses are all paid for and they'll have all this money to take care of themselves. 37% of people 65 to 74 have a mortgage. I'm not quite at that age group, but I will have one. 21% of age 75 have a mortgage, and I will have one at age 75 unless I can figure out a way to pay it off. Seniors are hit especially hard by the economic recession and the housing bubble. And what may be happening, and may be happening in Howard County, is that aging in place has really become stuck in place. And we really need to think about that. Health. Second pillar is health. I think for health, we all have a good role model in Moses. Moses died at 125 with his eyes undimmed and his vigor unabated. Most of us really just want to take care of ourselves and by ourselves as long as we can without assistance. So we have a less of a goal with Moses. But in both sets of interviews, people were very concerned about their health. The first group of people who are more wealthy were working out religiously, if you will, or non-religiously as the case may be. But even the group that didn't have quite as much money was totally concerned about their health. You may not be able to be in the 1% of wealth, but everybody should strive to be in the only 1% that counts, and that's being in the top 1% of health. The senior centers, by the way, is one of the things I did. I was the chair of the Howard County Commission on Aging in the early 2000s, and I was amazed, and I think they've done a great job of being about health, and I think that's to their credit. The interviews clearly reflected the success of Medicare, but it comes at a price. About 25% of the average Social Security check for 2011 went to pay premiums and co-pays for Part B Medicare and also Part D prescription drugs. And so when you get your Social Security check, a lot of that is going to Part B or Part D. The third thing to talk about is the informal support network, which Phyllis put first, and that's really for a good reason. As Bruce Springsteen says, everybody's got a hungry heart. It don't make no difference what nobody says. There ain't nobody that wants to be alone. The positive impact of a long-standing relationship to good friends and neighbors is well established. It was especially prevalent in the first group of interviews. But however, as age-related health issues and mobility declines, the informal network begins to fray. Your friends all get older. They all have their own issues. And that is why families become even more important. And that is why we're really pleased that the next panel consists of younger Howard Countyans. Let's talk about the last pillar, the formal support network, which Phyllis has is use of community services. AARP data indicates that 90% of people 65 and over desire to age in place in their home, but can they? This move or stay decision is what we at the Women's Institute for Secure Retirement call one of 7 life-defining financial decisions. We will all decline health-wise at some point. As the noted geriatrician Charles Barkley of NBA TV said, "By the time's never lost." This formal services network is technically referred to as the long-term services and support, but what we call it was the formal services network, or the paid network, if you will. Even today, and you're going to hear a lot about from Beth about some innovations going on in nursing homes. Even today, according to the Long-Term Care Commission, which I have attended several meetings of, there are 11 million people who need some kind of assistance with their daily activities today. By the way, nearly half of those are under 65, the types of people that Phyllis in the coordinating center. 1 minute, okay. And the cost of this is tremendous. $317 billion was spent on long-term care in this country last year. The study indicated there's great uncertainty, and I think out there, y'all would confirm this, how's this going to work for me? Who's going to pay for it and who does what? In that regard, one quick fact, the BLS has reported, Bureau of Labor Statistics, that 4 out of the top 10 jobs in the next 10 years relate to health care, and especially direct care jobs. And that's why it's so important that Howard Community College has started a health sciences program, and we really all need to stay behind that. That's all I have to say, except I'm going to turn it over to our younger panel. I did go to spin class today. Okay? And I don't know if this band Green Day fixing the Generation X, Y, or the Millennials. I'm not sure. But Green Day has a great song called Boulevard of Broken Dreams. People like me, it's a great song to spin to. It's a great climbing song. That was the song, the next to last song in spin class. They ended it with Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I really think the next panel is faced with both of those decisions. And that's why we're really thrilled to have a younger panel here, and I'm going to turn it over to Alice.